I had just turned 59 when the promotion list came out. It was a Tuesday morning, overcast, drizzling, and I still remember the weight of the mug in my hand as I refreshed my inbox, waiting for that email. I'd been with the company for 18 years. Not a startup, not some trendy new age nonsense, just a solid logistics firm with warehouses across 3 states and a habit of promoting from within. I'd worked my way from data entry clerk to senior operations coordinator without ever once calling in sick or turning down a late shift. My husband used to joke that I was more reliable than the freight trucks. He passed away 2 years ago, and since then, work had become everything. The promotion to regional lead would have been the natural next step. I'd done the work already when Jason, the former lead, had gone on medical leave. For 3 months, I ran the team, negotiated supplier contracts, managed schedules, and kept our KPIs above target. So when the promotion went to Chad, a 34-year-old who had been with the company for less than 3 years, I felt my stomach drop. Not from shock, from humiliation. That afternoon, I walked into my manager's office, Elliot Harrington, tall, graying, always smelling faintly of cologne and overconfidence. He gestured for me to sit, gave me that thin, rehearsed smile. "I know you're disappointed, Linda." "I am," I said calmly. "I'd like to understand what went into the decision." He leaned back like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. "You're invaluable, but leadership at the regional level requires a steadier temperament. And well, you have passion, but sometimes that passion can read as emotion." I blinked. "Emotion?" He raised his hands like he was trying to soften a blow. "It's not a bad thing. It's just not the right energy for upper management. You take things personally. You get involved. That's not always a strength." I smiled, nodded, and inside me, something sharp and cold began to form. I walked out of that office with the same smile, sat back down at my desk, opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Elliot. And then I started to remember things. Small things. Things that didn't mean much on their own, but together might mean everything. The first thing I wrote down in the folder was from 4 years ago. It had come back to me the moment I stepped out of Elliot's office. Odd. How memory works when anger sharpens it. It was a company retreat. We were at a rented lodge in the mountains, a so-called team-building weekend that mostly involved awkward small talk, forced games, and too much wine. That night, as everyone loosened up, Elliot had cornered one of the new hires, Amanda, in accounting. She was 26, just out of grad school. I remember she laughed too hard at his jokes, kept glancing toward the door. She left the company 3 months later, said she wanted something with more structure. I had believed her. Now I wasn't so sure. I pulled up the old staff directory and made a note to find Amanda on LinkedIn. The second thing I wrote down was from last December. Elliot had sent out the annual bonus spreadsheet to the wrong group, one that included me. I remembered glancing at the numbers, not intending to snoop, just curious. Chad had received a bonus larger than mine, despite having half the responsibilities. It had stung at the time. Now it burned. The next day, I invited my friend Karen to lunch. She was a quiet, serious woman from HR who had worked at the company almost as long as I had. We'd never been close, but I'd always respected her. I didn't tell her everything, just asked questions, carefully phrased. "How are promotions really decided?" I asked over soup and salad. She looked at me sideways. "Depends. Officially, performance, tenure, leadership potential. Unofficially, sometimes, who's in the room when decisions are made." Ever seen something that didn't feel right? Karen sipped her water. "I've seen a lot of things that didn't feel right. But unless someone files something official, it's just whispers." That was when I realized I couldn't just gather stories. I needed proof, but proof had to be collected carefully. If I was too obvious, too loud, he'd bury me before I had the chance to lift a finger. Back at the office, Chad was settling into his new position. He seemed overwhelmed. He had no idea how the budget spreadsheet worked, and had already asked me 3 times how to generate vendor reports. I helped him each time with a neutral tone, even when he gave me that sheepish, boyish grin, like we were in on some harmless joke together. I wasn't laughing. That night, I pulled out the USB I kept in my drawer. It was old, small, black, and silver. I backed up a copy of every email between myself and Elliot from the last 3 years. Then I started scanning for red flags, phrases like off the record, between us, and keep this quiet. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with all this yet, but I knew the storm was coming. And Elliot? He had no idea I was already checking the windows. The next morning, I found Amanda. It took a little digging. Her last name had changed, but LinkedIn led me to her new company, a nonprofit in Portland. She looked different now. Confident. Happy even. I sent a short message. Hi, Amanda. This is Linda M. from your old job. I know it's been a while, but I'd really appreciate the chance to speak with you briefly about something important. Please let me know if you're open to a quick call. I hesitated before clicking send. My heart thudded in that quiet, uncertain way it did when I was younger and still unsure of myself. But I clicked it anyway. Within the hour, she replied, Hi, Linda. Of course. I remember you well. I always appreciated your kindness. Sure, let's talk. We spoke that evening. She remembered the retreat right away. He kept touching my shoulder, she said, her voice steady but clipped. Kept calling me sweetheart in front of people. I told HR when I left, but I didn't want to cause drama. I was just done. Did you file anything officially? I asked. Number I didn't think anyone would believe me. And honestly, I just wanted to move on. But if something's happening now, if you need a statement, I'll back you up. I thanked her. We didn't cry. We didn't rage. We just sat in that quiet truth for a moment. And when we hung up, I opened a new Word doc and typed out everything she said, word for word. The next day, Chad messed up an order form and routed an entire shipment to the wrong warehouse. I spent 2 hours untangling the error. He looked panicked. Elliot laughed it off in the hallway. Growing pains, he called it. I didn't smile this time. I went back to my desk and added it to the folder. Later that week, Karen stopped by my cubicle casually. She didn't say much, just dropped off a copy of our company's whistleblower policy, folded into a file about internal training programs. Her face didn't change. She didn't pause. But I knew what she meant. After work, I drove to a coffee shop across town and ordered a tea I didn't want. I opened my laptop and reread the document. Then, I drafted a new email, saving it as a draft. It wasn't addressed to anyone yet, but it outlined, without emotion, without accusation, patterns. Language, behaviors, financial disparities, names, and a subject line that read, regarding concerns of leadership misconduct, confidential. I didn't send it. Not yet. But just knowing it existed, I slept better that night than I had in weeks. By the end of the following week, things at the office began to shift. Chad's mistakes weren't small anymore. A delayed vendor payment led to a shipping halt in our Nevada warehouse. Thousands in penalties. And while I worked late correcting it, Chad had already clocked out and posted a selfie at a bar with the caption, Work hard, play harder. I saw it on his public Instagram. He didn't even follow me, but someone on the team showed it to me with a tight smile. And then something unexpected happened. Marisol, a junior coordinator who sat 2 rows behind me, approached me in the break room. I heard what Elliot said to you after the promotion list came out, she said quietly. He didn't close his door all the way. You handled it better than I would have. I didn't respond at first, just stirred my tea, watching the steam rise. She went on. I'm not trying to get involved, but he said something similar to me during my review last year, that I needed to be less reactive if I wanted to move up. I asked for examples. He had none. I turned to look at her. Young, smart, always on time. I'd mentored her when she first started. She hadn't said anything back then, but she was saying it now. You should write that down, I said gently. I already did. That night, I opened a second folder. This one was labeled Testimonies. I added Amanda's statement, typed out what Marisol told me, and marked them both as dated entries. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk by the river after dark. Not to think, but to feel. To remember who I was before they made me small. I used to take risks. I'd gotten this far by showing up early, working late, keeping my head down, and letting the boys play their politics. But now I was ready to be the storm. The following Monday, Elliot called a department-wide meeting. Chad stood beside him, nervously tapping his foot, as Elliot cheerfully announced a new leadership training series that he and Chad would be piloting. Designed to help improve communication and emotional management across teams, he said, with a knowing glance in my direction. I smiled right back. That afternoon, I added it to the folder, along with a screenshot of a message a coworker forwarded me. Elliot had described the training in a private Slack channel as a way to keep the drama queens busy. He thought it was a joke. I thought it was evidence. And then I saw Karen. She stood across the office, eyes meeting mine for just a second. She gave the smallest nod I'd ever seen. It was time. I opened the email draft that night, reread it twice, attached the PDF with my documentation. Then I added Amanda's contact, Marisol's typed note, and 5 screenshots. 2. Internal HR. Ethics and compliance subject. Concerning patterns of behavior. Elliot Harrington. I clicked send. Then I closed my laptop. The air in my apartment felt different, lighter, but not safer. Because now, it had begun. 3 days passed, 3 days of silence. No email reply. No acknowledgement. No visit from HR. Just the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the clack of keyboards, the mundane rhythm of corporate life continuing as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. I noticed it in the way Karen no longer made eye contact, in how Marisol avoided the break room entirely. I noticed it most in Elliot, who had suddenly become too polite, too aware. He called me Linda 3 times in one sentence on Wednesday morning, asked if I needed help with the Q3 reconciliation, as if he'd ever lifted a finger on that task before. Chad stood in the doorway behind him, holding a clipboard upside down. I just smiled and said, all under control. That afternoon, I got the email. From Internal HR. Ethics and compliance, subject confidential. Concerning patterns of behavior. Elliot Harrington, dear Ms. Martin, thank you for your submission. We are reviewing the materials you provided. A member of our internal team will reach out to schedule a private conversation. Please do not discuss this matter with any other employees until the review process is complete. It was cold, professional, but it meant they had opened it, that it had been read, that it was real now. That evening, Karen knocked on my cubicle wall. She looked tired. I won't ask, she said softly, but I will say, be ready. Sometimes these things take on a life of their own. I nodded. Was it you? She didn't answer. Just left a granola bar on my desk and walked away. The next morning, Elliot skipped the weekly team stand-up. Chad mumbled through updates while flipping through notes he clearly hadn't written. When someone asked about the warehouse penalties, he stuttered and said, "It's being looked into." It wasn't. I'd already fixed the issue and closed the file. Then at 2:15 p.m., I was called into conference room C. Two HR officers were waiting, Janice, who I knew vaguely from payroll, and a man I'd never seen before. His badge read, Compliance Lead. His voice was smooth, too smooth. "We want to start by saying we appreciate your professionalism in this matter," he said. "You've raised some serious concerns, and we've begun a formal inquiry." They asked me questions. Calm ones. Precise. I answered without anger, without embellishment. Just facts, dates, screenshots, patterns. I watched their pens move across paper. I watched them underline. When the meeting ended, Janice held the door a little longer than necessary. "I'm not supposed to say this," she whispered, "but you're not the only one." It hit me then. Not just adrenaline, but grief. Grief for the years I had worked through holidays, missed my husband's doctor appointments, skipped family gatherings to be loyal. For what? I sat in my car after work and let myself cry. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Then I wiped my face and opened my phone. Amanda had texted me. "Heard from someone still there. Things are moving. Be careful. Proud of you." I replied, "Thank you. I think this is only the beginning." And I was right. By Friday morning, it was clear that Elliot knew. He didn't say it outright. He didn't have to. The way he stopped using my name, referred to me only in vague directives. Can someone handle that? That task Linda usually does. It was a performance, and we were all watching. Chad's nervous energy had tripled. He stopped asking me for help entirely, which meant everything he touched started to unravel faster. A client escalated a complaint when a wrong inventory list got sent out. Then, a vendor backed out of a quarterly contract because their payment hadn't gone through. But Elliot didn't reprimand him. He blamed process miscommunication. That afternoon, Karen stopped by again, quietly slipping a manila folder onto my desk. "Just training documents," she said casually, and left. Inside were internal emails, anonymous, redacted. But one phrase kept repeating, pattern of favoritism, emotional manipulation of junior staff, inappropriate comments during travel assignments. There were others. I wasn't just a lone voice shouting into a void. I was a thread in a much bigger, tangled web. And that terrified Elliot. On Monday, he tried a different tactic. "Linda," he said, with that fake pleasant tone he reserved for board meetings, "do you have a moment?" I followed him into the conference room. He closed the door gently, sat across from me like we were about to discuss budgets. "I just want to clear the air," he said. "I know you were disappointed about the promotion. That's understandable. But I think it's time we move forward. Let go of hard feelings. Focus on the bigger picture." I met his eyes, steady. "I've always focused on the bigger picture, Elliot." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We all want a peaceful work environment. Nobody wants drama." There it was, the warning under the velvet. "Then perhaps," I said, voice calm, "we should all behave accordingly." His jaw clenched, just slightly. And that was the moment I knew. He was afraid. I returned to my desk, heart pounding. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my tea. Chad walked by quickly, not looking at me. Marisol stopped by later and whispered, "I think something's happening. HR asked me to confirm some things." I didn't name you, but I said what I remembered. I nodded. She touched my hand, just for a second. That warmth carried me through the rest of the day. But that night, alone in my apartment, I felt the weight of it, the fear of retaliation, the risk that maybe nothing would change, that maybe Elliot was too protected, too clever. What if I had just painted a target on my back? I went to the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the old photo of my husband. He was smiling, holding a fishing pole on a sunny pier. You always said I had a fight in me, I whispered. And in the stillness of the room, I found it again. It was a Tuesday when everything shifted again, but this time, it wasn't quiet. I arrived at work to find my login credentials had been reset. At first, I assumed it was a system error, but when I called IT, the technician on the other end hesitated. I was told to reroute your access privileges, Linda, he said. Said it was part of a restructuring request from upper management. I thought you were notified. I hadn't been. By noon, I couldn't access the budget files, vendor communications, or even my department's schedule. My calendar was wiped clean. Tasks I'd been handling for years were suddenly reassigned to Chad. Karen came to find me around 1 p.m. She looked pale. He's trying to isolate you, she said in a hushed voice. He thinks if you're disconnected, you'll lose footing, that you'll panic. And HR? I asked. They're watching, she replied. But Elliot's smart. He knows how to play this, just subtle enough to deny everything. I clenched my hands beneath the desk. It was happening, the slow squeeze. That evening, I updated the timeline in my documentation. This wasn't just professional strategy anymore. It was retaliation, textbook, and dangerous. But Elliot had miscalculated. Because that same evening, something else happened. An anonymous tip was posted on the company's internal messaging board. How many women have been told they're too emotional to lead here? How many have had their work reassigned, their logins changed, their voices silenced, asking for a friend? It had no name, no signature, but it spread like wildfire. By the next morning, half the company was whispering, and by the end of the day, the post had been taken down. But the damage was done. The silence? Broken. At 3:47 p.m., I received an unexpected email. Subject, formal interview request, Ethics Committee. Dear Ms. Martin, based on multiple reports and statements gathered over the past 2 weeks, we are moving forward with a formal internal hearing regarding concerns involving Mr. Elliot Harrington. We are inviting you to testify as part of the ethics review. Your participation is voluntary, but your insights are considered critical to this matter. I stared at the screen for a full minute before reading it again. The words felt heavy, real, a formal hearing. That meant someone was pushing back. Possibly legal, possibly the board. Later that night, Amanda called me. I just heard from a friend in HR, she said. They've opened a case file with legal oversight. I closed my eyes. So it's no longer just HR sweeping it under a rug. No, she said. Now they have to follow procedure. I hung up and sat in the dark. For a moment, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a woman standing in the middle of the street during a thunderstorm, hoping lightning doesn't strike. I poured a glass of water with shaky hands. My fingers brushed the edge of the frame on my kitchen counter. It was a photo of my first office, 1992. Smiling, younger, hopeful. I hadn't changed. I had endured. And now, they'd have to look me in the eye and listen. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9:30. I didn't sleep much the night before. I went over my notes again and again, not because I didn't know them, but because the silence in my apartment felt unbearable. I cleaned the kitchen twice. I laid out my clothes, navy slacks, white blouse, my wedding band still on my finger, though I'd long stopped thinking of myself as anyone's wife. At 8:45, I arrived. Karen met me near the elevators. She didn't say anything. She just squeezed my arm lightly as we rode up together. It was the most human moment I'd had all week. Conference Room A had been turned into a neutral zone, HR, legal counsel, someone from the board. No Elliot, not yet. I sat at the far end of the table, a glass of water untouched in front of me. They began with questions, measured, controlled. They weren't interested in drama. They wanted documentation, timelines, names. I gave them all three. I spoke slowly, calmly. I explained how Elliot had a pattern, favoring younger male hires, penalizing outspoken women, isolating anyone who questioned him. I told them about Amanda, about Marsol, about the sudden system lockdowns, and quietly reassigned work. When I finished, they asked if I felt safe. It was the first question that caught me off guard. I paused. No, I answered, but I feel stronger than I did before. They nodded. I was escorted out after that. They said they would bring in others separately. I knew Chad was on that list. Marisol too. Possibly even Karen. That afternoon, Elliot didn't show up for work. Word spread fast. Some said he had called in sick. Others said he was pulled into a separate legal meeting. Nobody knew the truth, but the fear that once followed me now followed him. And then, at 4:15 p.m., the email arrived. From HR Department, subject, staff notice, interim management change. Effective immediately, Elliot Harrington is on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal review. In the interim, departmental leadership responsibilities will be overseen by a transitional management team. No explanation, no apology, just a sudden shift in power. I stared at it for a long time. Marisol walked by my desk, her eyes wide. Did you see it? I nodded. She smiled. They never thought you'd go this far. Neither did I. But it wasn't over. Because that evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. You think this is a win? You're nothing without this job. They'll toss you next. You'll see. No name. But I didn't need one. I took a screenshot, added it to the file. The next day, I printed a copy and slid it across the table to HR. Elliot still has access to internal contact databases, I said quietly. Janice from HR didn't argue. She just picked up the paper and nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not outside me, but inside. They could try to erase me, but they'd already failed. I had become the one thing they couldn't silence. The office was different with Elliot gone. Quieter, not in the way sound disappears, but in the way tension releases from the walls. Like the building itself was exhaling. People started knocking on my cubicle again, not with fear or gossip, just with normal questions. Normal work, the kind I'd been doing in silence for years. Now, suddenly, my voice mattered. Chad approached me timidly by the copier. Hey, he mumbled. I didn't know everything that was going on. I just thought I was doing my job. I looked at him for a long moment. He wasn't cruel, just complicit. A product of a system that told him his ambition was leadership, and mine was emotional clutter. I hope you do better moving forward, I said quietly. He nodded. And to his credit, he didn't defend himself. The following day, HR issued a follow-up email to staff. The investigation into complaints of workplace misconduct involving Elliot Harrington is ongoing. We acknowledge the courage of those who have come forward and affirm our commitment to a safe, equitable workplace. Any retaliation, direct or indirect, will be treated as a serious violation. Karen forwarded it to me with no message. Just a single emoji, a small flame. That afternoon, Janice from HR called me in. We traced the text message to Elliot's company-issued device, she said. He violated policy by using internal data after being placed on leave. His access is now fully revoked. Legal has been informed. I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. He'll likely try to make noise outside, she added carefully. Social media, industry gossip, we're monitoring it. I'm not afraid of noise, I replied. I've lived with silence for years. That was worse. When I returned to my desk, there was a card sitting on my keyboard. No name, just handwritten words. Thank you for opening the door. We were all waiting. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened. The final piece fell into place when I was called into a meeting with two people I'd never met before, both from the executive board, a woman named Layla and a man named Frank. "We've reviewed your records, your contributions over the last 2 decades," Layla said. "It's clear you've been an integral part of this company's growth and stability." I waited, wary. "We'd like to offer you the position of Regional Operations Director," she said. "Officially?" It was the title I should have had all along. But I didn't answer right away. I looked at them. Really looked. "Is this a reward?" I asked. "Or a quiet apology?" Layla didn't flinch. "Maybe both. But it's yours, if you want it." I told them I needed time to think, not to be strategic, but because I'd spent so long proving my worth to people who already knew it. Now I had to decide if I even wanted to stay. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and a blank page. I didn't write a resignation letter. I didn't write an acceptance letter. I just wrote a question. What does peace look like now? I stared at it for a long time. And finally, I breathed. A week passed. I didn't answer their offer. I didn't talk to HR or the board. I did my job, quietly, professionally, competently, as I always had. But I also took long walks at lunch. I called my sister, whom I hadn't spoken to properly in months. I took a Saturday and drove to the coast alone, stood barefoot in the sand with a coffee in hand, and just listened to the ocean. I needed to remember who I was without the weight of someone else's shadow. On Monday morning, I walked into the office early. No one was there yet. The sun was rising behind the blinds, casting golden slats across the floor. I stood in the middle of the room and listened to the silence. It no longer felt oppressive. It felt earned. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into the executive boardroom. "I appreciate the offer," I told them. "But I'm not accepting." Layla blinked. "May I ask why?" "Because this place taught me I had to be silent to be valuable," I said. "And now, it's offering me a title I stopped chasing the moment I found my voice. I want something different now." Frank frowned slightly. "Are you leaving?" "I am," I said, but not bitterly. "I'm proud of what I did here, but I won't spend the next 10 years teaching others how to be strong in a place that once called strength a weakness." I left the room with my head held high. I packed my desk that afternoon. Karen came by, tears in her eyes. "You were brave," she said, hugging me tightly. "And you reminded me what that looks like." Marisol stopped by too. "They asked me to be part of the leadership transition team," she said, "because I spoke up, because you spoke first." I smiled. "Make the place better than we found it." Chad came by last. He handed me a small plant. "I was blind," he said, "but I'm not anymore." "You were young," I replied. "Now be better." That night, I sent one final email. To Elliot Harrington, archived. Subject, Re. Too emotional for leadership. You once told me I was too emotional to lead. You were right. I care, I feel. I cry when I'm angry, and I shake when I'm afraid. And I led anyway. While you silenced, I listened. While you played, I worked. While you ruled through fear, I endured with grace. I was too emotional, and that's exactly why I won. I didn't send it, of course. I just typed it, read it, closed it, and let it live quietly where it belonged. In the past. 2 months later, I started consulting, helping women navigate leadership from the ground up. No pretense, no politics, just honesty and strength. Sometimes I still hear from Marisol. Sometimes Karen sends me photos from inside the new office lounge, now renamed after a woman who stood for integrity. Not me, Amanda. And sometimes, when I speak to rooms full of women who've been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, I start with one sentence. My manager once told me I was too emotional for leadership, so I smiled, nodded, and then I broke him with the truth. And every time, someone in the back wipes away a tear. Because they know. Because they were me. Because we are never too emotional to lead.